In 1991, scientists announced they had created a revolutionary new material at the molecular level, something that had never existed before in human history. They were wrong. It had existed for over 1,700 years, forged inside a sword, by craftsmen who had no idea what they were making. That's just one of the 5 weapons in this video, and it's not even the most disturbing one. Greek fire. 672 AD. The Arab fleet is closing in on Constantinople. Hundreds of warships. Thousands of soldiers. One of the most powerful naval forces ever assembled in the ancient world. The Byzantine Empire is moments away from collapse. Then the Byzantines deploy something that no one in that fleet has ever seen, or ever survived to describe properly. A liquid, fired through bronze tubes mounted on the front of Byzantine warships, hits the water around the Arab ships. And starts burning. On top of the ocean. Sailors jump overboard. The fire follows them into the water. It doesn't matter how much water surrounds them. It doesn't matter that they're in the middle of the sea. The substance burns hotter when it contacts water, not weaker. The Arab fleet is annihilated. This is Greek fire, and it held the Byzantine Empire together for almost 700 years. Here's where modern science gets seriously uncomfortable. Chemists have been trying to reverse engineer Greek fire for decades. They've used spectroscopic analysis, chemical residue tests from ancient battlefield sites, and every historical account ever recorded. They still can't fully recreate it. We have educated guesses. Naphtha, a petroleum-based compound, was almost certainly a core ingredient. Quicklime, which generates violent heat when it contacts water, was likely part of it. Sulfur and pine resin may have been in the mix. But nobody knows the exact formula. Because it was never written down. Not once. Not anywhere. The Byzantines protected this secret so completely that senior military officers didn't have access to it. The full recipe lived exclusively within one family, the Kallinikos family, passed verbally from parent to child, never committed to paper, never sold, never shared. When the empire fell, the knowledge died with the last person who carried it. What physical analysis of ancient burned sites tells us is this: Greek fire burned at somewhere between 1000 and 1200 degrees Celsius. It was self-igniting. And water made it worse. That's not medieval chemistry. That's not even close to what the 7th century was supposed to be capable of. 1300 years later, we cannot build it back. The Greek precision war machine. Here's a question that history textbooks almost never ask. If ancient Greeks were primitive, how did they build something that disappeared from human capability for 1,400 years? In 1901, divers pulled a corroded bronze object from a shipwreck off the coast of Greece. It sat in a museum for decades before anyone understood what it actually was. When they finally did, it changed everything we thought we knew about ancient technology. It was a mechanical computer. Built around 100 BC. Powered by over 30 interlocking bronze gears, some with teeth smaller than half a millimeter, it calculated the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets, and predicted eclipses years into the future. Nothing like it was built again until European clockmakers in the 1300s began constructing mechanical astronomical devices. Think about that gap. 1400 years where the mechanical knowledge required to build this object simply vanished. Now the question that actually matters: if the Greeks could build something that advanced for tracking stars, what were they building for war? Ancient texts describe a portable crossbow-style weapon called the chirobalistra. When modern engineers reconstructed it from those ancient specifications alone, what they found was striking: the power-to-weight ratio of this weapon rivals high-performance modern crossbows. Not close to modern crossbows. Rivals them. The geometry of the design, how the springs were sized, how the arms were proportioned, how energy was stored and released, reflects a precise, deliberate understanding of mechanical physics. These weren't guesses refined over generations. Someone calculated these numbers intentionally. Some researchers now believe calculation tools, similar in concept to the Antikythera mechanism, may have been used specifically to determine optimal firing angles and projectile weights for siege artillery. Essentially, a targeting calculator. For catapults. In ancient Greece. We can't prove it with physical evidence because wood and rope rot over 2,000 years. But the mathematics embedded inside the weapons they left behind points to a level of scientific understanding that history has been quietly undercounting for a very long time. Damascus steel. Imagine you're a European knight in the 12th century. You've trained your whole life. You know steel better than most people know anything. You know what a sharp blade feels like, what it can take, where its limits are. Then you encounter a Damascus steel sword for the first time. The edge is not slightly sharper than what you're used to. It is incomparably sharper. Crusader accounts describe Damascus blades cutting through European armor the way a knife moves through cloth. You pick it up expecting brittleness, because in your experience, the sharpest steel always shatters under impact. Hard steel breaks. But this one doesn't break. It flexes. It absorbs hits. It holds its edge through conditions that would destroy any European blade you've ever held. You have no category for this. In your world, a sword cannot be both razor-sharp and impact-resistant. These properties cancel each other out. They always have. And yet this one has both. You go home and try to describe it. Half the people you tell don't believe you. Now here's the part that explains why they were right to be suspicious. Because what was actually happening inside that metal is more bizarre than anything a medieval knight could have imagined. When modern materials scientists analyzed surviving Damascus steel blades under electron microscopes, they found carbon nanotubes inside the metal structure. And carbon nanowires. These are molecular-scale structures, so small they exist at the level of individual atoms arranged in specific patterns, that modern nanotechnology only began producing artificially in laboratories in 1991. Their discovery was celebrated as a scientific breakthrough. We had never seen them before. Except we had. Inside swords built 1,700 years ago. The ancient smiths who forged Damascus steel had no concept of atoms, molecules, or nanostructures. What they had was a process, passed down through generations, that involved specific or sources from India, specific temperature cycling during forging, and the addition of organic materials like wood and leaves that released carbon in ways nobody understood at the time. That carbon self-assembled into nanostructures inside the cooling metal. By complete accident. Through pure empirical refinement over generations. The smiths knew the process worked. They had no idea why. The knowledge died around 1750 when the specific Indian or deposits supplying the raw steel were exhausted. The last generation of smiths who knew how to compensate with alternative materials took the process with them. Modern metallurgists have been trying to reproduce true Damascus steel for over 70 years. Same hardness. Same toughness. Same internal nanostructure. They haven't done it. A weapon forged in the 4th century contains a scientific discovery we made in 1991.
Weapon number 4, the Roman rangefinder. For over a century, this object has driven archaeologists quietly insane. All across Europe, in regions that were once Roman territory, researchers keep finding small hollow bronze objects roughly the size of a fist. 12 flat faces. A circular hole of a different diameter on each face. Small ball-shaped knobs at every corner. Over 100 have been found. Not one Roman text mentions them. Not one military manual. Not one document of any kind. For all the meticulous record-keeping Rome is famous for, these objects appear in the archaeological record and nowhere else. Historians spent decades proposing explanations. Decorative objects. Religious artifacts. Toys. One academic paper, published by a real institution, seriously proposed they were used to calculate the optimal knitting needle size for gloves in different seasons. People were desperate. Then a Belgian engineer looked at the geometry and noticed something everyone else had overlooked. The holes aren't random. The diameters follow precise mathematical progressions relative to each other. The knobs at the corners create a consistent grip point that holds the object at a specific angle when extended at arm's length. He proposed the Roman dodecahedron was a rangefinder for artillery. Here's how it works in practice. A Roman artillery operator holds the dodecahedron at arm's length and looks toward his target, a ship, a gate, a tower. He looks through pairs of holes until he finds the pair where the target appears to exactly fill the circular opening. Because each hole has a different diameter, and the relationship between hole size and the distance from the eye creates a consistent angular measurement, each hole corresponds to a specific distance range. Find the right hole. Know the distance to your target. Adjust the catapult accordingly. He tested this theory using reconstructed Roman artillery and historical range data. It worked. A portable, standardized, fast-to-use distance calculator. Small enough to fit in a soldier's pouch. In the 2nd century AD, optical rangefinding wasn't formally developed in modern military doctrine until the late 1800s. Portable rangefinders became standard infantry equipment in the 20th century. Rome may have been using one 1,800 years earlier. The theory isn't universally accepted, some researchers still argue for other interpretations. But nobody has been able to explain the mathematical precision of those proportions as purely decorative. Whatever this object was designed to do, the Archimedes death ray. Deliberate, extraordinary Everything precision. In this video so far has been disturbing in a quiet, technical way. This one is different. This one asks you to believe that a man in 212 BC built a directed energy weapon. The context: Rome sends its fleet to capture Syracuse, a Greek city on the island of Sicily. The Roman general Marcellus brings overwhelming force. The city should fall within days. What Marcellus didn't account for was one man. Archimedes. The greatest scientific mind of the ancient world. The man who discovered displacement. Who gave us foundational geometric and mathematical principles still taught in universities today. Who reportedly told a visiting official, "Give me a lever long enough and I will move the world." According to multiple ancient historical accounts, written by different authors, in different places, decades apart, Archimedes designed a system of large polished bronze mirrors positioned along the harbor walls of Syracuse. These mirrors were angled to focus reflected sunlight onto Roman warships approaching the city. The ships caught fire. At a distance. Without any soldier touching them. Marcellus reportedly told his officers he was fighting a geometrical Briareus, a mythological 100-armed monster, because something invisible kept reaching out and destroying his fleet every time it approached. He retreated. For centuries, historians dismissed this as legend. Setting a wooden ship on fire with sunlight sounded like the kind of story that grows every time it's retold. Then people actually tested it. In 1973, a Greek engineer named Ioannis Sikas gathered 60 sailors, handed each one a large copper-coated mirror, lined them up on a harbor, and directed them to focus their reflected light on a wooden rowboat 50 meters away. The boat ignited within seconds. In 2005, a MIT research team attempted a more controlled test using 127 mirrors focused on a mock Roman ship hull at 30 meters. It caught fire. Now, the practical objections are legitimate. This weapon only works in strong direct sunlight. Moving ships are hard to track simultaneously with dozens of mirror holders. The coordination required in the chaos of an actual naval battle would be extremely difficult. Many physicists argue those limitations made it impractical as a deployed weapon. But none of them dispute the physics. Concentrated reflected sunlight absolutely can ignite wood. The geometry required to design such a system is mathematically sound. And Archimedes specifically possessed exactly the knowledge required to calculate mirror angles, focal distances, and target geometry for this kind of application. He didn't just theoretically might have been able to do this. He was the only person alive in that time and place with the specific knowledge to design it properly. Directed energy weapons, lasers, high-energy beam systems, solar concentrators, are considered cutting-edge military technology today. The United States Department of Defense has spent tens of billions of dollars developing them over the past 4 decades. Archimedes may have deployed one, using bronze, geometry, and sunlight. 2,300 years ago, and still defeats
Christ grants us victory!
Damascus steel,
Fire on
technology
them!
that humanity didn't officially discover until 1991. Greek ballistic engineering precise enough to vanish for 1,400 years and still rival what we build today. A Roman rangefinder deployed nearly 2 millennia before the concept was reinvented. And a solar weapon designed by a man whose equations we still put in front of university students. Here's what all 5 of these have in common, and this is the part history classes consistently get wrong. Ancient people were not less intelligent than we are. Full stop. What they lacked was accumulated knowledge, the recorded scientific framework that centuries of documented human discovery eventually built. But the raw cognitive ability? Identical to ours. And when minds like that turned toward a specific problem with enough urgency and enough time, they solved it in ways that still leave modern experts without complete answers. The uncomfortable question these weapons force us to sit with is this. How many other discoveries, formulas, techniques, technologies, were developed, lost, and then reinvented centuries later by people who had no idea they were walking a path that someone else had already walked? We may never fully know. But here's what we can say with confidence. The gap between what ancient civilizations knew and what we assume they knew is much larger than most people realize. Now, if that made you question what else we've gotten wrong about history, the next video is going to hit harder. We're covering ancient structures that engineers have physically measured, run the construction numbers on, and concluded that building them with modern equipment would be a serious challenge, let alone with the tools available thousands of years ago. The math is genuinely unsettling. It's right there. Watch it next. You won't look at those structures the same way again.